Today is day 13 of the Karen Read trial. I'm going to give you my daily recap. We have Yuri Buchanan back on the stand, and this is Alan Jackson doing the cross-examining. He finishes the day still on cross, so he will be back on Monday, which will make him the witness that's in the hot seat for the longest amount of time this trial. We get into what happened on February 10th. Apparently, he recovered 10 pieces of clear, black, or red plastic, or apparent plastic. It could have been glass. And Alan Jackson is asking, did you document exactly where you found these pieces? And he says no, but they were found in the same general area of the lawn, about 40 to 50 square feet. Jackson is hammering in on the fact that there's no photographs or a chart or map of the scene and where each piece was found. You handed over the evidence to whom? Because on the bag for the evidence, it is not Yuri's handwriting. He handed it over to Trooper Proctor, we find out eventually, but he is so slow to give up those names. He doesn't want to say Trooper Proctor. He doesn't want to mention anything about him. He doesn't want to say that he's the lead investigator. It's like pulling teeth to get any answers. We do learn that this evidence from February 10th was actually booked on March 14th, 2022. Jackson wants to know whose possession was this in. He said he doesn't know. There's a lot of objections. He asked Buchanan if he knows. He says, are you aware since January 29th, there have been 46 pieces that have been recovered from 34 Fairview. The last piece was actually recovered on February 18th. He says, I wasn't aware then, but I was made aware of this after the fact. And then we start talking about the weather after the incident. On February 4th, he went to the scene. It was raining, he remembers. And on February 11th, another piece was found by Trooper Proctor. He had been out there the day before, though, on February 10th, and that's when he found a bunch of pieces, the 10 that are there. But one more piece was found by Proctor on February 11th. So they just he's kind of hinting, like, are these pieces just magically appearing? Like, you went out there and did a search, and then Proctor found another piece the next day. This is when it really starts to get juicy. So we turn to some of the surveillance video from the Waterfall Bar, and he identifies a few people that are in the camera angle, and it's Brian Higgins, and he wants to know what time Karen and John arrived. It was around 11:03. You were aware of the romantic interest between Karen Read and Brian Higgins, and he is downplaying the fact that there was flirtatious text messages, and he says he received an extraction from Brian Higgins' phone, but he didn't do the extraction, and it was not performed by him or the Mass State Police, he says. And then he, like I said, wants to know, do you describe these text messages as flirtatious? And he says he can't label them that way. How would you describe them? Were they business texts? He said, no, they were friendly communications between acquaintances. Were you aware of the text message about sharing a kiss? And then we have an objection and a sidebar. They take a 30-minute break, and we come back, and we're actually getting ready to hear Yuri Buchanan read all of the text messages between Brian Higgins and Karen Read. This was the text messages that were turned over by Higgins himself. He had a buddy of his at ATF do the extraction of the specific messages that he wanted. He put it on a CD or a USB drive, and he gave it to the Mass State Police. In the last trial, Brian Higgins read all of these himself. It was very uncomfortable. And I don't know if Brian Higgins is actually going to be called as a witness by the prosecution, because here we have Alan Jackson being like, this is my chance to get them in because that extraction was given to Yuri. So he's going to read all the text messages, but not before the judge was like, you're certainly not expecting him to read this whole document. Apparently it was like a thick printout of pages. And he says, yes, I expect him to. So we have another sidebar. And then we start getting into the text messages that begin Wednesday, January 12th at 8:27 p.m. from Brian to Karen. I'm going to put up a bunch of the screenshots and walk you through them, but Brian is in the blue. I really didn't take notes on any of the text messages, but it took over an hour for him to read these. It went all the way up to the lunch break. It starts off with, like, how did Karen get Brian's phone number? Why are you texting me? Apparently a friend, I think her name was Melissa, had given the phone number. So that's how they start texting. Karen is interested in Brian Higgins. You will see through the text. If you want the whole thing, go watch the long crime stream. I think it started around I would say 11 something and it ended at 1. If you want to fast forward to just get that clip of all of the text messages being read, she's coming on hot. She's coming on heavy. She's trying to flirt with him and he is actually not having it. He doesn't understand what's happening. One of the texts says she was going to rent a beach house in Fort Lauderdale, something quick and easy. He says, I didn't take a screenshot of the next one, but then the next one was oh, I'm going to Nashville for a colleague of mine got shot in the head. And it was she was trying to get you interested in Florida or a vacay or hanging out, and you totally turned the combo. They talk about Brian Higgins' father. He passed away in March 2020. So they do get deep into conversation. A lot of this you stink, you suck, and trying to be flirty. Karen comes out right away and says, you're hot, and he wants to know, are you serious? Are you messing with me? And she says, no, I'm serious. And he said, the feeling is mutual. Is that bad? He wants to know when you were interested, and she says, I don't know, you're just my type. And he's also interested too, but he's wait, aren't you and John O'Keefe together? There's a little bit more flirtiness. They do get together for a Patriots playoff game at John O'Keefe's house. Brian Higgins comes over and Karen walks him out, and I guess when he's leaving, there is a moment where they share a kiss. So there's more flirting. I don't know why this one was blurry, but we kissed, right? Is this a trick question? Higgins wants to know, are you breaking up or are you staying together? What's the play? So, and then she explains a little bit about when they went to Aruba. This came out in the last trial. Brennan has said he's not going to call those witnesses this time. But when they went to Aruba, Karen thought she saw him making out with one of his longtime family friends. So that's what she's referring to here. One thing I didn't know before is she had colon cancer and 10 surgeries in 18 months. I knew that she had something, but these text messages have never been displayed. More text messages. I'm pretty sure we would have hooked up, alluding to Karen wants to hook up. Let's just put it that way. And then there is a point where they do meet up before, or it was January 19th this night. She says, home, alive, cool, thoughts, maybes, I don't know. So something went down. And then on January 23rd, right here, it says, have not heard from you. She wrote, phone works both ways. Thought you were all set with talking. No, sure. And then, was Friday night. This was the 28th, 11:32 p.m. So I think it's when she walked into the waterfall. And then John died is the last text at 11:54 a.m. on Saturday, and he never responded to that. And that's the end of the text messages. I think I'm gonna have to go to part 2 because I only have 2 minutes left in this video, but I did want to point something out. I have noticed in the past few days, it started, I think, when Jen McCabe was on the stand, but Karen is literally barking at, it was either Yannetti or Alan Jackson when they're questioning the witness, in open court, to get their attention, and it's a lot of this while he's questioning the witness. And it kind of looks like she has a lot to say. She's driving this ship. There are things that she wants to be asked and to be on the record, and she's not hesitating in bringing any of it up. All right, now let's go to part 2.